Hello everyone, welcome to a salubrious meeting room in the basement of Transport for London. We'd very much hoped that Andy Lord, the Interim Transport Commissioner for London, would join us on stage to give a presentation and take questions from all of you. That wasn't possible in Andy's busy schedule, so I'm afraid you're stuck with questions from me instead. I'm Paul Clifton, BBC's transport correspondent for Southern England for the last 28 years. Andy, though, has been in office for just a matter of days as Interim Commissioner following the departure of the previous Commissioner, Andy Byford. But for the last 3 years, he has been Managing Director of London Underground and then Chief Operating Officer for TfL, following a 30-year career in aviation, mostly British Airways. Andy, can I start off by asking you about the reason you couldn't make the conference today? Industrial action on the Underground and on London Overground. What's the current state of play?
Well, firstly, Paul, thank you for the opportunity to join virtually, I guess, today, and many apologies to everybody for not being there. As you rightly say, we've got industrial action planned by the RMT union on the Tube, and actually by Unite on some of our surface network. We're still in talks with the unions today, so we are trying everything we can to get the action called off. The dispute is different to the dispute on national rail, which is related to pay and working conditions. On the Tube, it's around jobs, terms and conditions and pensions. We haven't put any proposals on the table about pensions. We want the unions to work with us to find a way through this. The action is completely unnecessary, and the last thing we need, obviously, when we're trying to ensure the economic recovery of the city and of TfL. And I'd like to apologise to everybody who's been disrupted by the industrial action today and reassure them we're doing everything we can to bring it to a conclusion.
When you get to a point where your own staff are walking away from their desks and going and standing on picket lines, it suggests something's gone really pretty wrong inside the organisation, doesn't it?
Well, TfL's been through some pretty tough times through the pandemic, and since then we've seen our revenues fall to as low as 4% of what they were pre-COVID. As you know, we've had to go to the government for funding support, and we've received £6 billion worth of funding, and we're very grateful for that. But we have to modernise the way we work. We have put proposals to our unions, which we continue to work with them on, and are delivering those changes across the working network of the Tube. No job losses. Nobody's been forced to do anything they don't want to do, but it delivers efficiencies for us that are much needed to ensure a safe and reliable Tube network, and of course that we become financially sustainable. And on the pensions, we have a condition of our funding agreement with government that we have to review our pension. We've met the first two conditions of that. We've submitted our reports, but there are no proposed changes to the pension scheme, and that is what is driving the industrial action, particularly with the RMT. We think it's unnecessary and really not in the best interests of their members or the organisation. And we continue to work with them. I actually have a very good relationship with the senior leadership of the RMT, and I hope we'll find a way through this.
You say you have a good relationship with them, but they're still striking. How is this going to get resolved, do you think?
Well, I really hope, as I say, we're in talks at this very moment. Whilst I'm talking to you here, my team are meeting with the RMT at this very moment. I hope that they will see that there is no reason to take this industrial action. There are no proposals, so it's really hard when one side of the table wants to take industrial action because they believe it will change what they perceive the government wants to do. And the reality is, we've complied with the agreement. If we'd not reached the funding agreement with government, we would not have received £6 billion worth of investment. We would not have the TfL that we have today. And this is about securing the long-term job security of everybody working in TfL today.
So there are lots of things we can talk about, pulling some strands out of what you just said. We've got the Elizabeth line, we've got the funding deal with central government, you talked about pensions, the work that you hope to achieve in the year ahead. But underpinning all of that is what is happening to travel patterns into and out of and within London after the pandemic, as people get used to new ways of working. What are those patterns now? How do you see them evolving?
Well, it's quite different to what we had, obviously, back in 2019. As you know, we fell to as low as 4% of ridership on the tube. In fact, we were actively discouraging people from using our network in line with the government restrictions. We have seen a degree of recovery. Weekends and leisure traffic is almost back to the levels of 2019. Weekends are regularly in the high 90% of what we saw pre-pandemic. But the real issue for us is during the week, and particularly Mondays and Fridays, with most people only working 2 or 3 days a week in offices in London. That is impacting our ridership. So we're across an average week, we're about 80 to 83% of ridership on the tube, 88 to 90 on the bus network. But we really need to get more people back onto the network across the working week. And we're doing a lot of work with businesses and the communities across the city to see what we can do to try and encourage people back to using the network.
But look further ahead, over the horizon. If you look at South Western Railway, for example, their peak travel into Waterloo is still only around 50% of what it was before the pandemic. That commuting of millions of people into London from the suburbs and beyond, that's gone, hasn't it?
So there's definitely been a structural change, there's no doubt about that. We're seeing quite different geographical splits. The east and the north into the city are almost back to normal levels of early morning peak traffic. The west and the southwest, as you say, much lower. I come in from the southwest of London myself. I can see the difference on the mainline network. But for us, it's around making sure, how can we find new ways to encourage people to use our network? You know, for example, we're working with Canary Wharf, who are looking to see how they can turn Canary Wharf into a destination, as well as just for office accommodation. They're building a new life science park there, which will be directly between the Elizabeth line and the DLR. So that creates a new opportunity for us. People are keen to come into the city for cultural events and for leisure purposes. What we need to do is find a way to get them in those early morning peak times and Mondays and Fridays, and that's where we've got to work as an industry together to encourage people to use all of our network.
Let's talk about the Elizabeth line. It's your big event of 2022, and this week we've seen the next phase of the opening. You were at Stratford on Sunday for that, with trains from Reading running through the tunnels for the first time, for example. Many of the people watching this will have been part of the supply chain that made that happen. What do you take away as the lessons from that they can apply to future projects with you?
Well, firstly, I'd like to say a massive thank you to everybody who's been involved in the construction of the Elizabeth line. It really is the jewel in the crown for the London Transport Network. We're immensely proud of the fact we've now got through running. I was on the very first train from Heathrow Terminal 5 at 7:52 on Sunday morning, and to go through the transition into the central operating section was really quite a moment. The Elizabeth line shows what can be done when we get long-term capital investment decisions in public transport, what it enables in terms of economic recovery and growth across the city. We've got other examples with the Northern Line extension and Barking Riverside. So, you know, we have the opportunity in the long term to get more investment into the public transport network in London, and that in turn creates more opportunity for our supply chain partners across the rail industry to work with us. And we already have that with the Piccadilly line upgrade and the DLR upgrade, where yes, we're bringing new fleet in. Obviously the Piccadilly line trains are being built up at Goole in East Yorkshire, but we're also upgrading a lot of the infrastructure, and there's a lot of contracts already been awarded, but there's more still to be awarded. So there's still a lot of work to be done with the supply chain across the rail industry with TfL.
Crossrail too?
Well, wouldn't we love that? I mean, that would just be amazing. Yeah, the route is safeguarded. We would love to get the funding for that, or the Bakerloo line extension, which I think is probably slightly higher up the agenda. Let's wait and see. I'm really keen to work with government and see what potential opportunities we can have, because we've proven the benefit of those long-term investment decisions.
Let's talk about money. Andy Byford secured a deal. It was only for 19 months, but the phrase long term was used, at least in comparison with some of the the week-long or a few-day deals that you had before. But this is a £10 billion a year business. You've got 27,000 staff. Your infrastructure projects take many, many years and they last for decades. How on earth do you go about securing a deal longer than 19 months?
Well, look, we're very grateful, as I've already said, to the government for the funding we have received, and Andy and all of us involved in getting the current agreement worked really hard with our partners in City Hall and with across the wider business in London to make the case for that investment. It is a longer term deal. It takes us through to the end of March 2024. We will be operationally financially sustainable by then, which means we can stand on our own 2 feet from an OPEX perspective. We do have a clause in the agreement where government have committed to work with us around longer term capital funding for major investment decisions such as further rolling stock renewal, line extensions, major resignaling, for example. And I'm really keen now to work with the new Secretary of State and his ministerial team to see how we can start making progress on that. And equally at the same time, as TfL, we have to continue to focus on being more efficient and delivering better value for money for the taxpayer and for our customers.
Well, the supply chain would tell you that the best way to be more efficient, the best way to provide that value that you mentioned, is to give them the security and long-term planning that they crave, that they need to invest in their staff, in their training, in their equipment. They need that deal even more than you do.
Well, we all do, don't we? I mean, TfL is not going to be a success without the supply chain. The supply chain are not going to be successful without successful TfL. And one of the things I did since I arrived as MD of the Tube is build more strategic relationships with our supply chain, look at how we could, despite the funding challenges, secure some longer term commercial contracts that give both sides certainty for the future, particularly around investment in our people, investment in skills and training, and that's really critical for us. And we have to continue to work together to make sure that we are delivering value for money. I think we've got to make sure that in all the projects that we have going forward, that we are making sure that those projects are delivered as efficiently as possible, that we maximise the value of every pound we spend, and at the same time think about the legacy that we can create and how we bring new skills into the rail industry, more apprenticeships, more graduates, or people looking for a second or maybe even a third career, whom we've taken many on in TfL over the last 2 years.
You're developing a business plan. I think it's due in December.
Yep.
What's in it?
Well, that would be telling, wouldn't it? It's very focused on how we see TfL through the next 3 years from the start of the next financial year, using the first year of the business plan related to the financial settlement we have, and then what our priorities are going to be going forward, making sure that we deliver TfL that is financially sustainable, as we said, making sure that we grow our customer and our revenue stream, and making sure that we are continuing to deliver towards a net zero railway and TfL organisation. So there's a lot in there. It's the first business plan we've produced since 2019. It's a big moment for us. I think it will be met with hopefully positivity from the supply chain because we want to continue to work on some new schemes and hopefully when that's approved, if it's approved, which I expect it will be by the board in December, we'll then be able to talk much more actively to the industry about what opportunities arise as a result.
Can we look for a moment at your role in the bigger national picture? How do you look at the strength of your relationship with national government? How do you fit in, you and the other devolved authorities, looking at that relationship with the new ministers in charge and Great British Railways, whatever may happen to that? How are you fitting into that jigsaw?
So, I mean, we know Sir Peter Hendy and Andrew Haynes very well in Network Rail. We have a very good relationship with them. TfL is already working with them and the GBR transition team and DFT around how we roll out wider contactless ticketing across the southeast, with potential for that to be grown across the wider UK. One of the new minister was at Stratford on Sunday, Richard Holden, who was very positive about what he saw, and I'm keen to work with him around how we can show the benefit of both TfL but the wider industry in terms of the levelling up agenda. The Mayor is very keen that we build stronger relationships and show the value that we can bring to the wider economy outside of London. Elizabeth Line is a prime example of that, £42 billion expected to be generated from that railway. So I'm really keen that as an industry we work closer together. TfL, I think, over the years has been a bit on its own. I'm really keen that we build those relationships. I know many of the senior players now, both in the TOCs and Network Rail, and I think we're much stronger as a collective if we work together, and I think that will have benefits for the wider industry as well.
It's quite a widely held perception that the Treasury and the Department of Transport are a bit wary of an organisation so large and so powerful as yours, and to a lesser extent the other devolved administrations, that they don't have control over. That you act independently of them and you spend your money how you choose. How do you get them to trust you with the nation's money?
Well, I think it's a really good question. Yeah, I'm immensely proud. We are the largest integrated public transport authority in the world, and that's quite a staggering thing to say. But I think when you look at what TfL have delivered over the years, the transformation on the tube, the investment that's been given to us and the benefits that have driven to the wider economy in London, we can show what can be done. What we also can demonstrate is the value that we bring to the wider UK. Our buses are all built in Northern Ireland, Scotland or North Yorkshire. Our trains for the Elizabeth Line built in Derby, trains for the Overground built in Derby. So we can show what investment in TfL can deliver for the country as a whole and for the wider industry. And I've come from a private sector background, you mentioned that in terms of aviation. I want us to be a much more commercial organisation, how we think, a much more commercial organisation in working with our supply chain partners. And it's not about TfL being so large and so big that we dominate. It's about how we take the best of TfL and share that with the wider industry so that we benefit the whole country.
We have 10% plus inflation. We have what the Bank of England calls the longest recession on record. We have prolonged industrial unrest that you're part of. We have the issues with the Treasury that we've just talked about. In short, we're still on a downward curve here. Tell me what that means for the supply chain and for your business.
Well, it's really tough, isn't it? The external economic factors are probably tougher than an awful lot of people have seen in their lifetime. What we have to do is demonstrate that, particularly with our trade unions, we've got to work together to prevent this industrial action. Nobody wins as a result of that. As an industry, we need to come together and work together, not fight against each other. And I think there's opportunities there. And at the same time, whilst the government clearly has significant fiscal challenges, is how we can demonstrate and make the case for longer term investment, which in turn will create greater employment, it will improve the skills base, and it will deliver wider economic growth, not only in London and the South East, but in the wider UK.
Okay, we talked about the macro issues. Let's narrow it right down. How is your style going to differ from Andy Byford, the previous Andy?
So Andy and I are quite similar in many ways. We have very similar principles in terms of how we lead the organisation. We're very focused on our colleagues. I want to make TfL a really great place to work, and that includes for our supply chain partners as well. Andy was absolutely focused on securing the funding agreement post-COVID and leading the organisation, which he did brilliantly during the pandemic, and of course absolutely driven to deliver the Elizabeth Line, which he did so well. My focus now is on the wider TfL. We've got a number of programmes to deliver. We've got Piccadilly Line, we've got DLR fleet, we've got the continuation of the 4-line modernisation re-signalling programme, we've got the Silvertown road tunnel, which the tunnel boring machine is just about to go under the Thames in the next few weeks. And we've got a number of other things that we want to focus on from an investment perspective. Got to get ridership up, we need to get our revenues up, we've got to focus on delivering a consistent customer experience across our network. And for me it's around continuing Andy's visible leadership, and also an opportunity to rebuild some relationships with particularly central government, the wider industry and our key stakeholders, which Andy wasn't able to do quite as well because he was in the middle of the pandemic and everything was done by teams. Hopefully now we can get out and about a bit more and meet in person. I think that will, along with some new people involved, create the opportunity for us all to move in a much more positive direction.
You are Interim Commissioner. Everything you've just said there sounds like that's a long-term challenge. Do you intend to be more than interim?
Well, I'd like to be, and ultimately that's a decision for the board and for the mayor. But I wouldn't have taken on this role if I didn't have the aspiration to do it permanently. TfL is an amazing organisation. We have 27,000 incredible colleagues who work directly for us, another 30,000 or more who work indirectly for us in concessions and in other service delivery, and of course the wider supply chain. I'm immensely proud to have this opportunity, and I do hope that that will continue, but at the end of the day that'll be for the board and the mayor to decide.
What drives you to want to do that? I mean, it's a hell of a big job. This isn't a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job. It's all consuming. And I know Andy Byford talked of how it took over his life, how he had hardly any time off. On a purely personal level, yes, it's a challenge, but it's a hell of a burden, isn't it?
Well, I don't think it's a burden at all. I'm, as I say, hugely proud to have the opportunity. I've been involved in operations and engineering all my life. I was operations director of British Airways for 7 years, the longest serving one in the airline's history. That was full on 24/7. I'm used to doing that. I'm very fortunate to have an incredibly supportive wife who hopefully won't be watching this interview, so I won't have to worry too much about it. But it is really important that we have our downtime, that we do take our holidays, and I've been very clear with all my teams. You need to make sure you have competent deputies who can stand in when you're not around. Clearly, if there's a dire emergency, you have to be available. But it is really important we take downtime. I'm a keen rugby fan, a keen cricket fan, a very average golfer, so I try and get downtime to do that. But I think, to be able to say you're leading I think the biggest and greatest public transport organisation in the world is there's not a lot else better to top that, I think.
Andy Lord, I'm sorry once again that you weren't able to join us on the conference platform in person. We understand you've got a very, very busy schedule, so thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us. From the basement at Transport for London, we'll go back to the conference hall.